Wonder of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 29, Part 2. At midnight, Adam paced under the palms. All seemed dim and gray and cool, a spectral, rustling whispering. The old familiar sounds were there, only rendered different by his mood. Midnight was haunting. Somehow the desert, with its mustering shadows, dark and vast and strange, resembled his soul and his destiny and the mystery of himself. How sweet the loneliness and solitude of the oasis. There under the palms he could walk and be himself, with only the eye of nature and of spirit on him in this final hour of his extremity. Happiness was not imperative. Self-indulgence was not essential to life. Adam realized he'd done wonderful things, perhaps noble things, but nothing great. Perhaps all his agony had been preparation for this supreme ordeal. How saving and splendid would it be if out of this stultified youth, with its blinded love of brother and its weakness of will, if out of the bitter sting of infidelity and his fatal, tragic deed, if out of the long torture of hardship of the desert and its strife, and its contact with souls as wild as his, how glorious it would be if, out of this terrible tide of dark, contending years, so full of remorse and fear, there should rise a man who, trained now in the desert's ferocity to survive, should use that force to a noble aim. Adam divined that he did not belong to himself. What he wanted for himself selfishly was not commensurable with the need of others in his life. Since he had loved Ruth Veary, the whole value of life had shifted. Life was sweet, but no longer, if he had to hide, no longer under the ban of crime. The stain must be washed away by slow and gradual change, by torments innumerable, had he come to this realization. Every base, selfish man held back its spirituality. No more, cried Adam, looking up. And in that cry he accepted the spirit of life, the mighty being that pulsated there in the darkness, the whispering voice of Jeannie's mother, the love of Ruth that had never was to be his. I will give my life for my brothers, he said. I will offer myself in punishment for my crime. I will pay with my body that I may save my soul. End of chapter. Wonder of the Wasteland by Zane Grey, Chapter 30, Part 1. Adam lingered in his travel through the beautiful Palo Verde Valley and at last reached the long swell of desert that led down to the Rio Colorado. Tranquil and sad was his gaze on the majestic river as it swirled red and sullen between its wide green borders toward the upflung wilderness of colored peaks he remembered so well. All day he strode behind his fateful burros. Here high on the riverbank, where he could see the somber flood rolling to the south, and there low in the willow-shaded trail. And though he had an eye for the green, dry coverts and the wide, winding valley, he seemed to see most vividly the scenes of boyhood and of home. And the memory revived the love he had borne his brother Gerd. The miles slipped by under his tireless stride. Hour by hour he had quickened his pace, and when sunset caught him with its call to camp, he could see the grand purple bulk of old Picacho looming in the sky. Twilight and dusk and night and the lonely campfire. He heard the sullen gurgle of the river in the weeds, and he saw the trains of stars reflected along its swirling surface. A killdeer, most mournful of birds, pealed his plaintive, lonely cry, and across the blue-black sky gleamed a shooting star. Like dancing specters in the gloom, Adam watched the gleaming river rolling on its grave in the gulf. Like all things, it died, was dispersed and had rebirth in other climes. On the afternoon of the third day, he turned under the red bluff into the basin of Picacho. Long the trail had been overgrown and dim, and cattle tracks were scarce. The wide willow and mesquite flats with its groves of cottonwoods had grown denser, wilder, no more crisscrossed by trails. And Adam slowed down now, and he skirted the edge of the thicket till he reached the bank of bronze rock that had flowed down from the peaks in ages past. The ocotillas, so pearly gray, so softly green and vividly scarlet, grew there just the same as long ago, when he'd plucked a flower from the dusky hair of Margarita. He welcomed the sight of them, for they were of the past. And here, side by side, stood the crucifixion tree and the Palo Verde under which Margarita had told him their legends. The years had made no changes that Adam could discern. The smoke tree and the green tree raised their delicate, exquisite, leafless foliage against the blue of the sky, beautiful and soft, hiding from the eye the harsh law of their desert nature. Adam tarried here. His wandering steps were nearing their end, and he gazed across the river at the wilderness of Arizona peaks. It seemed he knew every one. Had he seen them yesterday, or was it long ago? The sculptured turrets of Picacho were taking on a crown of gold, and from the sheer ragged bluffs of the purple mass, shadows and hazes and rays were streaming down into the valley. One golden streak slanted from the wind-worn hole in the rim. Solemn and noble, the castle mountain towered in the sky. In its lonely grandeur there was strength. One moment longer Adam watched and listened, absorbing the color and glory and wildness, stung to the depths of his heart by his farewell to loneliness. He retrograded one last instant to the savage who sensed but did not think. He thrilled to the old mysterious, fading instinct. Then, as an answer to a sonorous call in his ear, he measured slow and laboring strides through the aisles to the river. His burros scratched their packs on the thorny mesquites to get down to the arrowweed and willow, where once had been open bank. Now all was green, except for a narrow sandy aisle. The dock was gone. A sunken barge lay on a bar, and moored to its end were two leaky skiffs. Traffic and trade had departed from the river landing. Adam remembered a prospector had told him that the mill had been moved from the river up to the mine under the peak. So now, he thought, supplies and traffic must come and go by way of Yuma. He drove his burros down the sandy aisle. A glimpse of an old adobe wall, gray through the mesquite, stopped his heart. He went on. The house of Arrhenius was a roofless ruin. The vacant windows and doors staring darkly, the walls climbing to the sands. The shed where Adam had slept was now half hidden by mesquites. The ocatilla poles were bleached and rotten, and the brush was gone from the roof. But the sandy floor looked as clean and white as the day Adam had spread his blankets there. 14 years. He stood silent, and the low, mournful wind nailed. The past could never be undone. Adam went back to the lane and to the open. Old stone walls were all that appeared left of houses he expected to see. Over the trees far up the slope, he espied the ruins of the dismantled mill. It looked unreal there and out of place, marring the majestic sweep of the slope. His keen desert nostrils detected smoke before he saw blue columns rising through the green. He passed a plot of sand-mounded graves. Had they been there? How fierce a pang pierced his heart. Rude stones marked the graves, and on one a single wooden cross, crude and weathered, slanted away. Adam peered low at the lettering, M.A., and swiftly he swung erect. There was a cluster of houses farther on, low and squat, and a few of them new, but most of them Adam remembered. A post office sign marked this village of Picacho. The stone-fronted store looked just the same, and the loungers there might never have moved from their tracks in 14 years. But the faces were strange. A lean old man, gray and peaked, detached himself from the group and tottered toward Adam with his cane in the sand. "Well, stranger, howdy, you down from upriver?" His voice twanged a chord of memory. Maryvale, slowly the tide of emotion rode in Adam's breast. He peered down into the gray old face with its narrow, half-shut eyes and its sunken cheeks. Yep, it was Maryvale. "Howdy, friend," replied Adam. "Yes, I come from up the river." "Strange in these parts, I reckon." "Yes, but I was here years ago." "Well, I knowed you was strange because you come in by the river. Travelers nowadays go around the mountain. Prospectors never come here anymore. The glory of Picacho has faded." "Aren't they working the mill?" queried Adam. "Ha! The mill will never grind with ore. That is gone. No work these last 5 years. The mill's rusted out, fallen to ruin, and the gold of old Picacho is gone. But stranger, she hum while she lasted. Millions in gold, millions, I tell you." He wagged his lean old head and chuckled. "I knew a man here once by the name of Arrhenius. What has become of him?" "Arrhenius? Well, I do recollect him. I was watchman at the mill, and he was a boss of the gang. His daughter was knifed by a greaser named Felix. And Arrhenius left here these 10 years since, and he's never been back." "His daughter? Is that her grave back there, the sunken mound of sand with the wooden cross?" "I reckon that's Margarita's grave. She was a pretty wench, mad about men, and there's some who said she got her just deserts." The broad river gleamed yellow through the breaks in the mesquites. Ponderous and swirling, it glided on round the bend. Adam's gaze then sought the peak. The vast, stormy purple mass, like a mountain of clouds, shone with sunset crown of silver. Somewhere near, hidden by the trees, a Mexican broke the stillness with song, wild and sensuous, Spanish love in its haunting melody. "I knew another man here," began Adam with the words, a sonorous knell in his ear. "His name was Collishaw. What's become of him?" "Collishaw never will forget him," declared the old man grimly. "Last I heard he was cheating Injuns out of water rights over here at Walters and still looking for somebody to hang. Ha ha, that Collishaw was a Texas sheriff." Suddenly Adam bent lower so that his face was on a level with Maryvale's. "Don't you know me?" "Well, I sure don't, stranger," declared the other. "I've been now 50 years in the West and never seen your like yet. If I had, I'd never forget." "Maryvale, do you remember a lad who shot off your fishing line one day? Do you remember how you took interest in him, told him of Western ways, that he must be a man?" Sure, I remember that lad," exclaimed Maryvale bluntly. He was old, but he was still keen. "How'd you know about him?" "I am Adam Larry." The old man's eyes grew piercing. Intensely he gazed, bending closer, strong and thrilling now, with the zest of earlier experience. sharp in his expression. I know you now, it's Adam. I'd know demise among 1,000 if I'd looked eagle's eyes, Adam, once seen, never forgot, and look at the giant of him. Well, you make me feel young again. Adam, lad, I ain't never forgot you. Never. Shake hands with old Maryville. Agitated with tremulous voice and shaking hands, he grasped Adam, almost embracing him, his old gray face alight with gladness. It is good to see you, Maryville, to learn you've not forgotten me all these years. Lad, you was like my own, but who'd ever know you now? You've white hair, Adam, and I see the desert in your face. Old friend, did you ever hear of Wansfell? Wansfell? You mean that wanderer the prospector tell about? Sure. I've been hearing tales of him these many years. Well, I am Wansfell, replied Adam. So help me God, Wansfell, you, Adam, the kindly lad, didn't I tell you what a hell of a man you'd be when you grew up? Adam drew Maryville aside from the curiously gathering loungers. Oh, friend, you're responsible for Wansfell, and now before I go, I want you to take me to my brother's grave. Maryville stared. What? He ejaculated, and again his keen old eyes searched Adam's. Yes, the grave of my brother Gerd. Say, man, you think Gerd Larry's buried here? That's why you come back? Astonishment seemed to dominate Maryville, to hold in check other emotions. My friend, replied Adam, I came to see his grave to make my peace with him and God, and to give myself up to the law. Give yourself up to the law? Gasped Maryville. Have you gone desert mad? No, I'm right in my mind, returned Adam patiently. I owe it to my conscience, Maryville. 14 years of torture. Any punishment I may suffer here, compared with those long years, will be as nothing. It'll be happiness to give myself up. Maryville's lean jaw quivered as the astonishment and concern left his face. A light of divination began to dawn there. What do you want to give yourself up for? He demanded. I told you, my conscience, my need to stand right with myself, to pay. I mean, what did you do? What for? Oh, friend, you've grown thick of wits, rejoined Adam, because of my crime. And what crime was that? Queried Maryville sharply. The crime of Cain, replied Adam sadly. Come, friend, take me to my brother's grave. Maryville seemed galvanized from age to youth. Your brother's grave? Gerd Larry's grave? By heaven, I wish I could take you to it. Adam, you're out of your head. You're desert mad. Bless you, lad. You've made a terrible mistake. You're not what you think you are. You've hid in the desert 14 years. You've gone through hell. You become Wansfell, and all for nothing. My God, to think of that, Adam. You're no murderer. Your brother is not dead. He wasn't even bad hurt. No, Gerd Larry's alive. The end of Wonder of the Wasteland by Zane Grey.